Imagine sailing into the Gulf of Mexico on a sun-streaked morning, only to have your crew gasp as the sonar picks up formations that look like stone walls at 20,000 feet below, no less. What if I told you that maps drawn by a turn-of-the-century explorer mark not just reefs or wrecks, but entire grid-like streets lurking under those turquoise waves? Could it be a lost civilization swallowed by time, or a hoax whispered by men who braved hurricanes and scurvy? Stick around, because today we're diving into rumors of submerged palaces, phantom archways, and the daring adventurer whose ship found itself trapped in a storm, carrying proof of an underwater metropolis that vanished into the abyss. By the end of this journey, you'll decide, is it a genuine archaeological wonder, or simply a mirage born of oil lamps and sea spray? Let's plunge into the Gulf's greatest secret indeed. Now let's rewind to the close of the 19th century, when the Gulf Coast was a swirl of shrimp boats, oil derricks, and steamers cutting through morning mist. It was 1898, and port towns from Galveston to Pensacola banked on seafood, sugar, and the promise of deep-water trade. Newspapers like the Galveston Gazette teemed with headlines such as "New Subaqueous Mystery Spotted Off Coast," while local taverns buzzed with fishermen's tall tales, barnacles clinging to what looked like facades of sunken fortresses, and schools of tarpon darting around straight lines that refused to be natural. Captain Elias Whittaker's steam yacht Magnolia was the pride of a Pensacola shipping magnate, polished brass, gleaming funnels, and a crew eager for adventure, or at least a break from hauling oysters. Whittaker himself was half scientist, half gambler. He'd once wagered a month's pay that his homemade sextant could outguess a naval chronometer, until it pointed straight into a mangrove. Yet when his sonar-like hand-cranked deep sounder pinged against what felt like limestone walls 3 miles down, even he cracked a grin of disbelief. Socially, America was riding high on progress and empire. Overseas wars had loosened purse strings, and curiosity about the unknown was in vogue. Wealthy clubs in New Orleans hosted submarine soirée, where ladies in corsets sipped absinthe while plotting expeditions. Beneath the pomp, though, many in the region whispered of haunted shipwrecks and veiled indigenous legends of drowned villages, stories that mixed French, Spanish, and native lore into a simmering stew of intrigue. Photographs from the era, now sepia-toned and faded, show explorers with oil-stained faces hunching over sheets marked with grid lines and cryptic notations. Sector A, possible aqueduct. Or Sector B, pillar at 22 degrees north, 89 degrees west. One battered clipping recounts how an oil lamp slipped into the water during a midnight dive, only to remain lit for minutes, casting ghostly shadows that experts still can't explain. And local fishermen, ever fond of a joke, claimed they'd seen entire columns growl like sea monsters whenever nets snagged on the seabed. It was against this backdrop of scientific ambition, swaggering optimism, and whispered folklore that our mystery truly took shape. The Gulf's turquoise calm masked currents that could drag a yacht under in seconds, and storm warnings, scrawled in journal margins, were often ignored in the name of discovery. Yet when the Magnolia flew too close to a gathering thunderhead, that very same storm would claim both ship and a trove of photographic plates, forcing questions about what lay beneath into frustration and rumor. But the truth behind those early sightings is stranger than any rumor. As we plunge deeper into those wrecked hopes and shattered archives, you'll find that stone walls, phantom archways, and coded sketches are only the beginning of a saga that has defied logic for more than a century. All right, now that we've set the stage and met Captain Whittaker's bold crew, let's dive into the heart of the mystery itself, the tantalizing clues that have kept treasure hunters, archaeologists, and conspiracy theorists guessing for over a century. Clue A: the lost diving bell. When the Magnolia returned for a second survey, they brought down a primitive diving bell, an iron bucket wired with thick hemp ropes and enough air for 3 minutes of bravado. On that first descent, engineer Samuel "Sammy" Hawkins signaled up a thumbs up and a thumbs down because no one had thought to teach semaphore underwater. Then silence. The bell creaked against what felt like stone. Hawkins's lamp glowed dim inside, and suddenly the ropes went slack. When the winch jerked it back up, the bell was empty. Hawkins gone, lamp still lit and resting on the grated floor as if he'd simply stepped away for a moment. No footprints to speak of, just scratch marks on the iron plates. Imagine losing Samson the submersible without even a be back in 5, and you get why rumors flew that something or someone had yanked Hawkins into hidden tunnels below. Let's rewind to that fateful descent. Lantern flickering, water pressing in, and then nothing. Clue B, stone blocks and strange glyphs. Fast forward 1 year, and a second expedition fitted their boat with the latest photographic equipment. Heavy glass plates dripping with developer in a makeshift darkroom below deck. Their images revealed cut blocks the size of small cars, stacked like a submerged parking garage. Upon closer inspection, archaeologists spotted glyphs carved into the stone, spirals that reminded them of Mayan codices, fish scale patterns echoing native Gulf Coast motifs, and symbols no scholar could match. One researcher quipped, "It's like someone told a barber to give a seashell a haircut," but even that levity couldn't mask the awe. These weren't random scratches left by anchors or drifting debris. They were deliberate enough to suggest a language lost to time. Some glyphs glowed faintly under ultraviolet light, hinting at pigments that resisted centuries of salt water, enough to make any underwater graffiti artist jealous. Clue C, phantom echoes on the hydrophone. Then there were the sounds. An inventive crew member rigged a hydrophone, an acoustic horn funneled through hollow pipes into the captain's quarters, and one night it picked up faint rhythmic echoes, a chorus of voices chanting in what sounded like a call-and-response pattern. "Oh-ree-ah, oh-ree-ah," they hummed, repeating in perfect sync. Crewmen insisted they heard laughter too, low chuckles that bounced off underwater canyons. Critics claimed it was whale song misinterpreted or air bubbles escaping old pipes. But remember, this was 1899. If it were a sunken speakeasy, we'd at least hope for spilled rum. Instead, these recordings, preserved in wax cylinders, sat locked away in a Pensacola museum until they mysteriously vanished in the Great Fire of 1922. All that remains are crew diaries describing voices from the deep that convinced more than one sailor to resign and open a land business. Clue D, the bottle mail diary. Decades later, a sponge diver off the Florida Panhandle pulled up a small corroded cylinder tangled in his net. Inside was a waterlogged journal from navigator Lucy Redding, one of the few women on board the third Magnolia voyage. Her entries spoke of corridors illuminated by bioluminescent algae, casting eerie green halos on walls slick with biofilm. She noted a grand chamber roughly 20 feet high, with what looked like carved alcoves that perfectly cradled ancient pottery shards. On the final page, her handwriting dissolved into smudges, followed by a lone line, "They come when the lights fade," and then a smear of ink, as if something wet brushed over the paper. Redding's jar washed ashore weeks later on a Key West beach, but she never returned. Some locals swear they saw a figure walking the pier at dusk, greenish glow trailing her like a ghost. Putting these fragments together, we encounter a mosaic of impossible architecture, unexplained soundscapes, and vanished explorers, elements as puzzling as they are enticing. Were these stone walls part of a lost Atlantean colony, as pulp magazines of the 1920s once proclaimed? Or perhaps they were the remnants of a Spanish fortress, dismantled and dumped to hide contraband gold from prying British eyes. Modern geologists point to natural salt domes mistaken for man-made blocks, while folklorists lean on indigenous legends of underwater villages swept away by hurricanes centuries ago. Yet none of these theories fully account for glowing pigments, precise carving, or voices recorded and lost before radio waves even existed. So what do these clues really reveal? Does the Gulf hide a bona fide city? Or have we simply tangled fact and fantasy beneath crashing waves? And why have so many witnesses, engineers, sailors, divers, disappeared into that watery labyrinth? As we surface for air, the question remains, who built these stone halls, and why would they vanish so completely? Keep these mysteries in mind as we turn next to modern investigations, where deep-sea drones, archival sleuths, and skeptical scholars hope to shed new light on this century-old enigma. Now let's turn our attention to the modern investigation, where archival records, cutting-edge technology, and local legends collide in a whirlpool of evidence and speculation. First, archival sleuths have scoured turn-of-the-century newspapers and Pensacola Mining Bureau logs for contradictions. A 1901 Gulf Coast Examiner article boldly declared, "No trace of man-made walls at sea." Yet a memo buried in the Bureau's basement recounts an unidentified stony structure found by Captain Whittaker's team. Even more curious, official correspondence warned scientists not to publicize sensational underwater claims, suggesting someone in power was determined to bury the story. It's almost as if the truth was sealed beneath bureaucratic red tape instead of salt water. Next, we consulted experts. Marine archaeologist Dr. Helena Ortiz laughs at the notion of Atlantean arches, yet concedes that limestone outcrops can mimic blocks when viewed through turbidity. Geologist Dr. Marcus Langford, specializing in salt dome formations, insists the glyph-like patterns could be natural fractures accentuated by marine growth, yet admits his own theories sputtered when ultraviolet photos showed pigment residues in the carvings. Then there's audio forensic specialist Jamal Reed, who analyzed the century-old hydrophone cylinders and found rhythmic echoes unlikely to be whale song, though he still can't explain how a hydrophone worked flawlessly at depths where water pressure would normally crush its diaphragm. We also revisited folk narratives. Local elder Joseph Baptiste swears his grandfather fished near an oil slick that spoke in human tones after throwing a chum bucket overboard. According to Baptiste, Creole fishermen in the 1920s left cedar candles burning at sea, believing flame would drive away water wraiths guarding treasure. Anthropologist Dr. Mireille Dubois points out these rituals blend indigenous Gulf lore with French spiritualism, making it hard to separate genuine sightings from evocative storytelling. Yet the persistence of these tales over 4 generations suggests kernels of truth buried in myth. On the technological front, a private marine tech firm recently deployed a deep-sea drone equipped with high-definition lights. Footage shows the drone's spotlight hitting a rectangular surface before its power conduit flickers out, twice. The drone's pilot, Liam Chen, jokes that even our best tech can't handle the Gulf's appetite for drama. But since the second outage, the same area has been off-limits to further survey. Conspiracy theorists gleefully dub it the blackout zone, convinced an unseen force wants to keep prying eyes away. Meanwhile, tinkerers haven't been idle. Amateur diver and engineer Paula Reyes rigged a homemade magnetometer from old car parts and a GoPro. According to her blog, she detected a sudden spike in the steel band's magnetic signature just over one of the street formations, only to have her headlamp extinguish moments later, plunging her into utter darkness. She surfaced swearing off DIY gadgets, but her data hint at metal fittings in the structures, perhaps relics of sunken ships repurposed by ancient builders. Adding to the mosaic, a recent geophysical survey using side-scan sonar mapped out endless pyramid-like ridges where earlier explorers reported only flat plains. Geophysicists caution that shifting sediment and methane seeps can sculpt natural mounds, but when one researcher attempted to core sample a ridge, the drill bit snapped, as if striking hardened masonry. The core fragments tested later showed trace elements of manganese crust, common on deep-sea surfaces but rarely in precise geometric arrangements. So where does all this leave us? On balance, the most plausible picture is one of natural formations dramatized by human imagination, intermittent technology glitches, and selective record-keeping. Yet those pigment-stained glyphs, acoustic anomalies, and disappearing explorers refuse to vanish under simple explanations. It seems the Gulf has conspired with human ambition to keep its secrets half buried. As we prepare to surface for our final thoughts, remember that science and speculation both have their limits, especially when the deep sea refuses to reveal its hand. We've explored diving bells swallowed by darkness, glyph-carved limestone outcrops glowing under ultraviolet light, and echoes of mysterious voices bouncing through hydrophone pipes. We've weighed expert insights that pin these shapes on natural salt domes and marine growth, yet even the most skeptical geologists admit pigments and composite metal remnants defy simple explanations. Oral histories of water wraiths, the vanishing of intrepid explorers, paint a picture as fluid as the currents themselves. So where does the truth rest? Perhaps in a blend of geology and legend, or maybe in an undiscovered chamber still waiting beneath shifting sands. Whatever the answer, the Gulf keeps its secrets well hidden. But our story doesn't end here. Imagine modern submersibles with AI scanning these underwater streets, or researchers decoding spiral glyphs with next-generation spectral imaging. Could we soon unlock a chapter of human history lost beneath waves? I can't wait to see what the next expedition unearths, and that might just be our next dive. If you've heard of other submerged mysteries, or think you know what really lies on the Gulf's ocean floor, drop your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more hidden history. Give this video a like if you enjoyed the ride, and share with friends hungry for the unknown. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and your mind on the depths.